A very good afternoon, dear students, and welcome back to the lecture of Entrepreneurship Development SYBBA Semester 3. I, Professor Shaurya Shah, welcome all the students to my lecture. Dear students, in yesterday's lecture, we studied about strategic planning in detail. What do you mean by strategic planning? What are the process of strategic planning that we completed? Now today our next topic is financing entrepreneurial ventures, right? Again students, a very much important topic in the subject of entrepreneurship development. We'll be looking forward to how a entrepreneur venture takes the finance, what are the sources of it, and what are the reasons for which finance is required in detail. Fine. So today's lecture you need to understand it again with a very much care so that entrepreneurship can be developed according to the finance that you have to study. Fine. So we'll be starting quickly, students. Now why finance is required? First of all, you need to understand that, right? So as you can see, the ultimate success of an enterprise depends upon the availability of sufficient finance, right? We can say, students, that a finance is the prerequisite for mobilizing the resources of an enterprise. Without finance, an enterprise can never work at all, right? So for that purpose, sufficient finance is required. Now an enterprise requires finance at every stage of its life cycle, right? Maybe at the time of beginning, maybe during the working of that firm, maybe during the closing down of that firm also you require finance, right? So for example, as you can see, in the inception stage is the stage at which the firm is set up, right? So in the inception stage, students, why does it needs finance? It needs finance for setting up, for example, plant and purchasing fixed assets, machineries, equipments, etc. Again, we can say during the development stage, once the business is started and it is entered into the development stage, the finance is required for continuous mobilization and upgradation of enterprises, again to survive and to grow in today's competitive business environment, right? So during the development stage also, in order to survive and in order to again grow more, you require finance. The third is for the efficient functioning of various departments, right? In business, as you all are aware, there are various departments. It may be production, it may be marketing, it may be research and development. Any enterprise completely depends upon the flow of the finance, right? So here we take one example. For example, imagine, students, the marketing department of an enterprise needs a sufficient amount for what? For promoting and distributing the product, right? So if it is not having the sufficient funds, how can marketing and advertising can be done for the promotion and distribution of the product? So while distributing the product, they need again finance, right? So financial needs of an enterprise depends upon various factors. Amongst that, the most important is size and nature of the business. What is the size of the business? If it is small, your requirement may be small. If it is large, your requirement may be large for the finance, right? Again, the nature of the business, whether it is a service industry, whether it is a manufacturing industry, so all those, whether it is a profession, so all those nature of the business also affects the finance requirement. I hope everyone is clear with the introduction part. Fine. Now you can see various types of finance which are needed at various stages, right? Here I have divided into two. One is early stage financing and the second is your later stage financing, right? Early stage financing is your seed capital stage. Now this is the stage when you start the business. You put a seed of your business and then you are about to grow. Then there is startup stage. Once you form your business, once you start your business, then the second stage is your startup stage. It is the growth of your business which has already started. The next is your second round financing. Once you have started your business, once you have achieved a certain level of growth, then you start with the second round financing. In order to expand your business to the new market, in order to explore the new opportunities, you need second round financing. Again, after doing this, after certain years, once your business is developed, then comes your later stage financing. In order to expand the business, you need expansion finance, then again mezzanine or bridge financing, replacement finance, turnaround. That is, again, if you want to replace the assets, you need replacement finance. Turnaround, if you want to change the business, that is again add a new product line, or you can say enter into a new market. Then buyout deals, right? If you want to buy some another firm, then it is a buyout deal. Management buyouts, entire management, again board of directors need some funds to buy out the other business. Management buyings, right? So these are your various kinds of finance. We are not going much in detail, but you need to have an idea regarding the various stages of finance which are required in early stage and later stage. I hope it is clear to every student. Fine. Now again, here we are clear with the finance topic, right? So we'll be starting with the topic which is actually given in your syllabus, that is financing a new enterprise, right? Now students, when you are starting a new enterprise as an entrepreneur, what type of finance do you require and for what purpose, that you need to study, right? Now as you can see, every enterprise requires finance for establishing its business and carrying out various related activities, right? These activities may be again divided into two parts. The very first is estimating the fund's capital requirement, and the second is deciding the sources, right? Here you need to first estimate the funds or the capital requirement, means how much capital do you require, right? And the second is deciding the sources, from where you will be going to get this capital, from which sources, from which institutions, that you need to decide. Now, an enterprise has two types of financial requirement. The first is fixed capital and the second is working capital, right? Now, students, many of you must be clear with this concept of fixed capital and working capital, right? So, what do you mean by fixed capital? Fixed capital, students, helps in purchasing the fixed or durable assets, right? Those assets like your land, building, machinery, equipment and furniture, the capital which you require to purchase this kind of assets. So in short, in order to purchase the fixed assets, you require fixed capital. Again, fixed capital is also known as long-term capital. Why long-term capital? Because once you purchase this kind of durable assets, you again not sell these assets in a shorter period of time. You maintain it continuously for your business up till your end of the business, if not required to replace. Fine. Again, the amount of fixed capital depends mainly upon the nature and size of the business. The larger the business, the larger the amount of fixed capital. Manufacturing industries requires huge amount of investment, whereas the trading concerns require comparatively lesser investment, right? So again, manufacturing, as I told you, if you are into the manufacturing business, you require huge machinery, factory, plant. So the requirement of fixed capital is much more, and compared to that, trading concern or service concerns, you require lesser amount. I hope it is clear. All of you must be clear with fixed capital. The next is your working capital, right? You all must be aware about the working capital. In accounts, we have studied that current assets minus current liabilities gives you working capital, right? So what is it? What is the meaning of that? Similarly, it is the capital, students, which is invested in current or short-term assets, right? Those capital which is required for day-to-day routine activities and it is involved in short-term assets is known as working capital. It covers various expenses. It may be buying the raw material, payment of wages, salaries, rent, fuel, electricity, and etc. Now students, after knowing the types of capital which is required by the short-term enterprise, you need to know estimating the financial requirements, right? How can a firm estimates its financial requirements and what are the reasons for it, right? So first of all, before starting with the estimating the requirements, an enterprise can raise funds only if it is clearly determining its financial requirements, right? What is the financial requirement? For what purpose does it need? It should be clearly determining it. Then only the estimate can be made, right? Again, estimating the financial requirements for an enterprise involves determining the total amount of capital required for various needs of business and deciding the sources and the methods to raise it. Fine. So again, students, while you are estimating the financial requirements, the total amount of capital which is required is to be determined first, and the second is deciding the sources and methods to raise it. Fine. So again, we'll be discussing various sources and the reasons for requirement of finance in the coming slides. Fine. Again, now the financial needs can be fulfilled though the owned capital or your borrowed capital. Fine. So you have to again fulfill these needs either with the help of owned capital or borrowed capital. Now you all must have studied in the balance sheet, right? Owned capital. Owned capital includes your share capital, that may be equity, that may be preference, or that may be due to hybrid securities. Then there are reserves and surplus and all, right? Again borrowed capital, maybe from debentures, maybe from long-term bonds, again maybe from various kinds of bank loans, institutional loans. So all these students, again it can be sourced from. We will be studying in detail in the coming slides. Now the financial requirements on the basis of periods of use are classified into three main types, right? Now students, you need to study all the sources which are there in three main types. Among that, we can divide it on the basis of time, that is long-term capital, medium-term capital and short-term capital, right? So again, the sources of finance can be divided into three main types. We'll be starting one by one. That is your first, long-term capital, right? So long-term capital, students, what do you include in long-term capital? First of all, what is the meaning of long-term capital? It is the capital which is required to finance the fixed capital and permanent part of working capital, students, right? As the name itself says, long-term capital. It may be more than, generally it is more than 36 months or 3 years where you require it for the fixed capital. As we saw, that is for purchasing the factories, purchasing the machinery, again purchasing the furniture, office building, so on and so forth, right? So again students, it is raised through various resources, right? It may be through your issuing debentures, it may be through by issuing shares, again by taking the loans and advances, so on and so forth. Fine. So I suppose it is clear. So two main things for long-term capital is, the first, long-term capital is for a longer period of time. It is used for fixed capital part and again permanent part of working capital. And the third, it may be issued by issuing shares, debentures, again we can say preference shares, equity shares, or by taking the loan. I hope it is clear to every student. Fine. Now the second is your medium-term capital. Again, medium-term capital, students, it is a kind of capital which is required for performing different activities. It may be related to your renovation of buildings, expenditure on advertising, modernization of machinery, etc. Fine. So these are the main purpose for which you require. Generally the term period is between 1 year to 3 years, right? For that you require finance, that is known as medium-term capital. Again, medium-term capital is used for, again we can say, issued by issuing debentures or shares or reinvestment of accumulated profits. Fine. So again, for that you require debentures, you require shares, or maybe you do plowing back of your profits. I suppose it is clear. That is medium-term capital. What do you mean by short-term capital? Short-term capital is generally used for your working capital requirements, students. It can be issued from your banks, maybe from installment credit, maybe from bank overdraft, trade credits, etc. Generally the term period is less than 1 year. So I suppose it is clear to each and every student. Fine. So what is long-term capital? Long-term capital is for a longer period of time, maybe more than 3 years or maybe more than 4 years. It is used for your permanent part of your business requirements of finance. Medium-term capital, students, medium-term capital is generally used for modernization of industry, replacement, and again we can say advertisement campaign. Medium-term can also be used from your debentures, shares, etc. Short-term capital, it is used for less than 1 year time period, right? And you get it from your bank. Again we can say bank overdraft, you can say cash credit, or you can say any other trade credits. So I hope everyone is clear with the financial requirements and types of capital on the basis of your periods. Fine. Now students, you need to study the sources of capital, right? We studied three types of various sources from where you can get it. In each and every type you need to study the, again, source for particular time period. Now when enterprise raises the funds for different purposes depending upon the time period ranging from short term to long term. We saw just now only for various purposes. It may be to purchase the factory, it may be renovation of factory, it may be renovation of machinery, it may be again to pay the debt. So for all that purpose you require finance depending upon the time duration. Now the total amount of financial needs of an enterprise depends on the nature and the size of the business that we know. On the other end, the aim of raising the funds depends upon the objective of the enterprise. Fine. So everything is related to the nature of the business, size of the business, and the objective for which you require the finance. I hope each and everyone is clear with that part. Fine. Now students, sources of finance, right? From which sources you can get three types of finance, that is long term, medium term and short term. We'll see each and every type in detail. Fine. Now amongst that, the very first you can see is sources of long term financing, right? Sources of long term financing includes your equity shares, preference shares, debt financing and your term loan. So we'll see one by one which source do you require for long term. Fine. Now first of all, as I told you, why do you require long term financing, students? You require long term financing for expansion, diversification, technological innovation, R&D projects, again for a longer period of time, right? It may be sourced from various sources that are as follows. Fine. So what is the first source? It is your equity financing. Now what do you mean by equity financing, students? Equity financing means raising the long term funds by selling the shares of the company, right? You must have heard about the term called IPO, that is initial public offer, right? Again, government companies, or we can say private companies or public companies, issues the shares in the market, and from the common public they raise the finance, right? Again, the investors gets ownership interest in the enterprise, and in return they are paid dividend, or in return they are paid the capital appreciation. Fine. So shares may be, again, as you know, basically two types, equity and preference. So the very first mode for issuing the long term finance is equity and preference shares. Share capital is dissolved only when a company goes into liquidation, students, right? So it is the permanent capital. The second is your debt financing. What do you mean by debt financing, students? Debt financing is a form of financial instrument that provides long-term debt to an enterprise, right? So you provide a long-term debt. From where do you raise the debt? It may be from debenture capital, it may be taken from banks, that is long-term loans, it may be taken from your financial institutions. Fine. So again, all those are your creditors of the company, and you need to pay fixed interest on that. So that you mean by debt financing. And the last is your term loans. Now what do you mean by term loans, students? They are the long term loans that are raised for more than period of 3 to 4 years. It may vary up to 10 years, 20 years, right? From where do you take term loans? You take term loans from your banks and financial institutions, right? Again, there are main sources, that is banks like IDBI, that is Industrial Development Bank of India, ICICI, that is your Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. You have HDFC, commercial banks, IFCI, so on and so forth, right? So you have various banks which gives you the term loans. I hope it is clear to each and every student sources of your long-term financing. Moving on to the sources of your medium-term financing, right? Again, why do you need medium-term financing, students? You require medium-term financing for performing different activities, right? These different activities may include renovation of buildings, expenditure on advertising, or modernization of machinery that we already saw. Fine. Now this can be raised from various sources. It may be first from your retained earnings. Retained earnings are your reserves and surplus, the profit, the reserves which you have again kept in your business. You can utilize those reserves. Second is your public deposit. You can again raise a public deposit from people. You have to pay interest on them, students, which is earned from your common public. Next is your hire purchase, right? What do you mean by hire purchase, student? Hire purchase is an agreement between two persons, that may be a hirer and hiree, right? In this agreement, the hiree transfers his asset to the hirer, keeping ownership of title with himself. Fine. A classic example is you purchase a car on EMI. Fine. So you take a car on loan, the ownership is with the bank, but the possession is with you. Fine. At the end of the loan, you again repay back the money and the ownership is transferred. So by the way of hire purchase also, medium term finance can be issued. Next is your lease financing. What do you mean by lease finance? You must be aware of the term called lease. What is lease? Lease is an agreement between the owner of the assets, right? Again, the owner is known as the lessor and the user of the asset is called lessee. In lease finance, only possession of asset is transferred to the lessee and ownership of title remains with the lessor, right? Again, the periodical payment is known as lease rent. So these are your various kinds of sources which are used for your medium term. And the last amongst that is your venture capital financing, the most important. What do you mean by venture capital? It is again one of the widely used sources, students. It is also called risky capital, right? Why? Because it requires to be paid even in the case of loss, right? Even if your business incurs losses, you have to compulsory pay the risk, that is, you have to compulsory pay the interest and the capital, right? Again, the capitalist who invest in venture capital is not similar to bankers and equity shareholders. A venture capitalist acts as a partner, manager, and advisor to the enterprise. This type of capital is required at the time of incorporation, expansion, and acquisition of a project, right? So, students, the person who invests in your business is known as venture capitalist. He acts as a partner, manager, and advisor to the enterprise. So, whenever you are very sure about your new venture, new business, that it is going to progress, then only you should adopt such kind of venture capital finance. Otherwise, retained earnings, public deposit, hire purchase, and lease finance are the commonly used method. I suppose it is clear. Fine. So all the 5 types of sources of medium term financing. Moving on to the short term arranging of finance, right? Now, what do you mean by short term arrangements of finance, students? Right? So you need to first understand, why do you require short term financing? Short term financing, as we studied just now only, is required for your working capital requirements. Fine. Again, working capital requirements, this you require for lesser period than 1 year. Fine. So for various business activities, short term financing is required. As you can see, there are various options available for your short term financing, right? Amongst that, the very first is your trade credits, right? So what is trade credit, student? Trade credit is an arrangement, we can say, in which the supplier allows the buyer to pay for goods and services at a later date in future, right? Generally, we know them as creditors. Suppose today I purchase the goods or service on 7th of July 2020. My creditor will allow me that you can pay the amount in either 1 month, 2 month, or 3 months date, right? So I am enjoying the services and goods today, but I have to pay it on a later date, right? So it is known as trade credits. You are giving credit for the trade which you are having. Fine. Again, now the creditors gives the loan, or we can say gives the trade credit to the another person on the basis of his goodwill. Again, we can say credit worthiness or previous transactions. I suppose everyone is clear with trade credits, commonly known as creditors. Next is your customer advances, right? Customer advances, what do you mean by customer advances? As a customer, you may be getting certain kind of advances, right? You purchase it today, after certain period of time you need to pay the money, similar like trade credit, but we are the customer, so we are getting the benefit of enjoying the money and paying it on after date. Fine. Next is your students installment credit. Installment credit, we all know about this, commonly known as EMI. Installment credit is another source of short-term financing in which the amount that is borrowed is repaid with interest in equal installments, right? Suppose today I purchase one of the asset, I have to pay the money in equal EMIs, that is for a period of either 1 year, that may be 9 months, that may be 6 months. Fine. So along with installment, I have to pay, that includes my interest and principal amount also. So it is also known as installment plan or hire purchase plan, right? Again, it helps the enterprise in purchasing the new plant and machinery in absence of funds for a time period. Fine. So for that purpose, if I want to get a long-term finance, or I can say long-term asset, I can purchase it through your various kinds of installment credits. Next is students, bank loan. Again, bank loan, you must be aware of bank loan. Bank loan is what? It is the money which is granted by the bank at a specific rate of interest, right? You can get the loans for various purposes, maybe your personal loan, maybe your business loan. Now this bank provides you the loan on the basis of the guarantee of any asset which you are putting, and for that you need to return the money for within a period of time to the bank, and the bank will charge the interest for it, right? So again, bank requires various kinds of proofs of income, identity, and a guarantor, so that you can enjoy the money from the bank. I suppose it is clear. Bank loan may be also for various term periods. Students, it may be for short term, it may be for long term, or it may be from medium term. Next is your cash credit, right? The term itself says it is your cash credit. What do you mean by cash credit, students? Cash credit can be termed as an agreement between the bank and the customers, right? What is it? It is an agreement between the bank and the customers to withdraw the cash which is exceeding the account limit. Suppose I am having a 10,000 rupees balance in my account. I have the cash credit facility, so I can withdraw more money than whatever I am having in my bank account, right? It is one of the most important instruments which is used in nowadays for short-term financing by business people, right? The time limit granted is generally 1 year, and which can be further extended by the bank in case of special request by the customer. So you can withdraw more money from your bank. It is similar like your bank overdraft, right? There are few differences between them that we'll see. Next is your commercial paper, students, right? What does it mean by commercial papers? Commercial papers are an instrument by which an enterprise with high credit rating raise money from the market, right? Those enterprise having high ratings, that's why the name is commercial papers, fine. It is an, again we can say, unsecured promissory note which the enterprise offers to the investors either directly or indirectly through the dealer. Commercial papers are generally sold by large enterprises which have a strong goodwill in the market, right? So again, as like your public deposit for a short term period of time, companies with high goodwill issues commercial papers in the market. People invest in that, and then after a company has to return them with interest after some period of time. Suppose it is clear, everyone, fine. The next is your certificate of deposits. What do you mean by certificate of deposit? It is a kind of promissory note which is issued by the bank, right? Similar like your fixed deposit to the clients for depositing the funds in concerned bank for a fixed time period, right? One of the example of that is commonly used, that is fixed deposits, right? On the maturity date, the bank will pay you the investment return, that is known as interest, and the principal amount along with that, right? Again, the maturity period of the certificates may range from your 3 months to 1 year. I suppose it is clear to everyone, fine. The next is your bills of exchange, right? What do you mean by bills of exchange, students? Bills of exchange, that is your common example we have studied already, is your bills receivable and bills payable, fine. What is it? A bill of exchange is a document in which an individual demands the receiver to give the payment for services and goods received to a third party on future date, right? There are two persons. The one who draws the bill, he is known as a drawer, and the another person who accepts the bill, he is known as a drawee, fine. Now again, the individual who pays the bill is known as payee. As we all know, suppose we are the creditor, we have sold the goods on credit to a person, right, to our customer. So what we'll do is, instead of giving the credit period, we will make him sign a promissory note that after so and so date you will pay us the money on this day. Now this is known as bills payable for him, and for us it is bills receivable. Now what I as a creditor can do is, I can discount this bill in the bank and I can receive the money by paying the nominal discount charges. So again, certificate of your bills of exchange are a source of short-term finance, fine. I suppose it is clear to everyone. Next is your factoring. What do you mean by factoring, students? It is a complementary financial service, right, which is provided to the borrower. The borrower has the freedom to select the set of services provided by the factoring enterprise, right? Factoring ensures that services will be given to the clients faster pace with good quality. What do you mean by factoring? Now, whenever students you are borrowing the money from the bank or from any precious financial institution, they are giving you additional services, right? These services may be to select the time period for the finance, to select the various rate of interest, flexibility in floating charge, so on and so forth, right? So that is known as factoring, not commonly used in India particularly, but it is also a short-term finance. Next is your bank overdraft, right? What do you mean by bank overdraft, students? You all must be clear. It is the temporary arrangement between the bank that allows the organization to overdraw from its current deposit account, right, with the concerned bank up to a specified limit. This is again granted against securities such as promissory notes, goods in stock, or marketable securities. The interest rate is which is charged on cash credit, right? So we can say cash credit and bank overdraft is similar, but bank overdraft is for a very short period of time, right? And cash credit is for a longer period of time. The interest rate may be similar in cash credit and bank overdraft both. In bank overdraft, you require certain securities, maybe your goods, maybe your stock, or maybe any kind of marketable securities. I hope it is clear to everyone. Fine. So what we have done is we have completed the sources of finance for long term, for medium term, and for short term. Fine. Again, a brief revision of what we have done in the entire lecture. First, we saw the requirements of your financial enterprising, that is your financial requirements of an entrepreneurial venture. We saw various kinds of sources from which you can get the money for long term, for short term, for medium term. We also saw fixed working capital, and again we can say the permanent working capital we saw in that lecture. Fine. So I suppose it is clear to each and every student whatever we have studied till now. Now only the last part of this chapter is remaining, students, that is managing the growth. Fine. That will complete in the next lecture. I suppose all of you are clear with that part. Fine. If any queries, you can post it in Google Classroom. We are there to help you out. Fine. Thank you, students, for attending the lecture. Take care. Have a good day ahead. This is Professor Shaurya Shah teaching you Entrepreneurship Development SYBBA Semester 3. Thank you very much.